All right, so wow, that was exciting. Um, let's see. For today, for the updates, went to Burlington twice. Used a bit more gas than I meant to, but it was kind of essential. Um, Samira. Um, I went in to work first and got my paycheck, and the boss had sent me a text yesterday saying what time to come into work, and I had not responded. In fact, I left it unread just to see what would happen. And normally, if she doesn't hear back from me immediately, she calls like right away. So I felt like, it's safe to say something might be up. And so, anyways, I was supposed to have heard something on Wednesday. Didn't hear anything till Thursday about that. Um, and by that time, I knew that either the conversation that was supposed to happen between the coworker and the boss had or had not. I would find out. So, went and got my paycheck and brought my shirt and my key. And she asked if I was going to be coming in tonight, and I said no. And she said, why? I said, because I'm quitting. Here's my shirt and my key. I'm done. And she looked at me for a second, like, before kind of, opting to the surprise face and asking why. And I said, I really don't feel like explaining it. I don't want to play any games. I would just like to get my paycheck so I can be on my way. And so then she went to look at payroll on her phone because, like I said, we don't get pay stubs. She has them on her phone, but we don't get them. And looked at the amount and said, okay, but we got to take the $20 off for what you owe for the gas you borrowed. I said, well, I was thinking about that Tuesday that I worked this week. Comes out to $36 for the 6 hours that I worked. You can just take the 20 out of that and keep the other 16. I won't be back. And then she goes, well, I don't understand why. And I said, well, I just have got issues that I'm not willing to argue about or anything else with the job. I'm done. And I said, once again, no games, please. Just, I would like my paycheck so I can move on. So then she starts saying, you make me so crazy. You're supposed to work tonight, and now you're not working, and I had plans. So right there, the fact that I was even on the schedule at all to work, schedule, we'll use that term lightly, was only for her benefit. If not for that, I don't even know. So she's writing the check out and kept asking why. I said, I'm not going to talk about why. I said, but I will tell you that this other coworker, I named the coworker to the boss. I said, this other coworker is the one that's telling people that you're drinking at work. And she goes, that I'm what? And I said, you heard me. And she goes, drinking what? And I said, alcohol. And she starts to chuckle and laugh while she's writing this check out and says, I don't drink alcohol at all. I said, I didn't say that you did. I said, that's what I was told. And by who? And then I mentioned that on that Tuesday that I worked last, that a customer had come in and asked her flat out over the counter, so have you started drinking yet today? And she looked at me like, what did you say? And I went about my thing because I hadn't said anything. So I told her about that. I reminded her, I said, when you looked at me, I said, I'm not the one that's been telling people that. The other worker is. And I told her, I've not talked to anybody, but she's the one that told me, and I'll bet that she's the one telling others. And at this point, she goes from taking her earpiece out but still on the phone to insisting that she does not drink at all. I don't know who she's trying to convince because I'd already quit my job. There's really no point trying to argue that with me. customers are coming in and going out as they, you know, go through and whatever, and I pull my shirt to the side and the key and wait for her to finish writing the check out. She was able to write the thing quite well, which made me wonder why she would ask me to add up customer checks amounts on a calculator if she's able to read and write numbers. I really don't. It's just another one of those funny, stupid little games. And she just kept chuckling and trying to put blame on me for I was going to ruin her night, and she had plans, and you're supposed to work, and, well, I'm sorry, but no, I'm done here, thank you. So I got my check, and she says, well, you're going to need to submit a letter of why you quit. I've got to send it to someone to tell them why you quit. And remember that I've not been able to get a straight answer as to the ownership nature of this business, who's actually in charge of anything. As an employee, it's nice to know who your boss actually is. And once again is, you know, just yet another contradiction coming from the same people. So I took my check. I didn't say anything. Every time she tried to goad me into argument, I just didn't say anything. I stood there and waited for her to finish writing the check out. She took her sweet time. And every time, you know, there was any mention of anything, if I did say anything, it was just, I'm not interested in any kind of games or discussion. I would just like my check so I can move on. And then she asked me about this letter, and I just didn't say anything, and she handed me the check, and I said, okay, see you later, and I walked out the door. So then I went to town and deposited some money, made my water payment for this month and last month, got that square. Took enough money out that I could get the things that I was going to need to continue to finish the repair on my truck. And went into Walmart, and I thought I put my phone on airplane mode. In fact, I had put my phone on airplane mode, but apparently it clicked itself off of airplane mode when I went inside the store. So just as I was done shopping and was going to the checkout, my phone beeped with a message, and it was a text from another coworker. Now, this coworker was only working 1 day a week, had another job in town, saying that she'd been told that I quit and was everything okay, and I finished checking my stuff out and paid and went out to the truck, and I answered, yes, I quit. Yes, I'm fine. I really don't feel like talking about it. And she was like, well, I don't understand and whatever. And I said, just don't trust that other employee, again, by name. Well, what do you mean? Did she offend you somehow? Did she, you know, what happened? And I didn't answer. And then about 5-10 minutes later, I get another text from her. Oh, in the meantime, I got one from the former boss saying, who told you that I drink at work? And so I answered that one back with who it was, and again explained, since I did not mention what I was told to any customers, but customers seemed to know anyway, that it was safe to assume that that was who was telling them. And so then I got another text from this other coworker, and this coworker, the person that was spreading rumors about the boss and telling me that they were going to get rid of the other lady from day shift to make room for me and whatever, which at the same time that lady supposedly had told her that she was told that they were going to get rid of me. That it wasn't fair to her because she was only working a day a week and whatever hours she felt like because she had another job and was just helping fill in, and it wasn't fair, and so I kind of owed it to her to, like, you kind of have to tell me why. And I just didn't answer back. At that point, I had still not received any messages or phone calls from the coworker that seemed to be the manipulator instigator, but at the same time, the boss has kind of got the tone of a manipulator as well, which means that you've got somebody that is let to think that they're in charge and is pulling strings and manipulating people, and that ultimately then becomes the scapegoat as well. So while I was able to get out of the scapegoat position myself, it didn't change anything, obviously. And I know that it's very likely that the boss had already gotten a hold of that coworker before texting me to ask for confirmation. And then after that, I also didn't receive any message from this other coworker. So it was kind of one of those, she knew she'd been caught. And at that point, I just put everybody whose number I had from that job on block. So they can't call and they can't message, and I was done with it, because when people want to keep trying to instigate and draw you back in and argue and find some fault in whatever you said, even though you're now outside their grasp, the best thing you can do is simply go no contact. So that's what I did. I got a phone call from my friend who's been previously helping to pay bills, who I went to work for a week. His tone of voice was really unfortunate. It was obvious that his suspicion was that I was having some sort of paranoia or delusion of persecution, when I've already laid out, and then he asked me to lay out, so I did so last night on the phone as well, what all the issues were. He didn't sound entirely convinced, but it's like, I've already picked up a few other interesting cues from this dude. He said that he considers me like his brother, but his actual brother is adopted and has fetal alcohol syndrome and has a real difficult time not screwing himself over. And I am not really in that position. I'm not fetal alcohol. I'm not learning disabled or anything like that. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. But there had been some issues with the week that I went to work, that I had been basically contracted by this guy to do drywall, and that he had agreed as part of the deal that he would prepare the room so that I could do the drywall. I would just hang drywall and mud the joints and spend the week getting it right. And he had completely failed to get anything done, to where we arrived there and he started tearing the wall out, getting the wainscoting off, and come to find out that there was no studding underneath whatsoever, and there was nothing on which to hang drywall, which meant the week of me working on drywall turned into a week of me cramming in a bunch of Tapcons and studs, and more lumber than he expected to buy, and finally me getting the drywall hung, and then getting a somewhat hasty but still, better quality than someone else doing the same level of haste would do on the mud. And the entire time, it was like he kept asking me about time frames and how long I thought this was going to take, and telling me not to get into anything that I couldn't finish. And I was like, well, I'll get the walls up and I'll get the mud on for sure, but it's not going to be a triple layer like you would prefer. And I kept getting this attitude and tone from him on that, about like asking me, well, I thought you said you were going to be able to do this drywall within the week. And it's like, yes, but there was an additional 40 full hours worth of work to be done, demolishing, cleaning, water sealing, because there was water damage on the concrete and cracks with seepage, filling in the cracks, coating the wall that was leaking with waterproof paint, and then hanging studs, which involves using a Tapcon bit to get the hole drilled before you can put the Tapcon screws into the wall through the studs. And it was a very laborious process. My back was extremely sore. You have to put your full weight into it and hold the drill for it to go through. I went through 4 drill bits on a 12 by 15 room doing the studs at 16 inches. And the entire time there was this whole disapproving, well, this isn't, and it's like, none of this was what we agreed on. I was hired for drywall. And same kind of almost condescending like tone of like, and this is the same thing as a friend of mine that was in a band that we were in a band together for a long time, and he happens to also be a mutual friend of one of the people that last summer really screwed me around and flat out lied to me. The person that I spoke to on the phone, because I was a telemarketer for years, I can recognize the voice of somebody I know on the phone, and I've met this guy many times, only to find out that I was told at the end of the phone call, after he found out who I was, that the person I needed to talk to was out at lunch and would call me back in an hour. And keep in mind, this was already 3 p.m. Who's at lunch at 3 and going to get back by 4? And by the way, the phone call never came. And of course, later on, I ended up seeing on Facebook that he had hired another mutual friend of ours, another guy that was in the local music scene, Samira. 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 Boy, wow. Samira. Yeah, Samira. 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 Shh. Find out that he hired somebody else instead about 2 months afterward for the same position. And congratulate the dude on there and whatever. And so I made sure to leave a comment naming the dude that he'd hired, who I considered a friend, and said, hey, just congratulations and whatever. And by the way, named the dude that I knew had talked to you on the phone. I said, I know that was you. I talked to you on the phone, and you told me you were going to call me back in an hour. That was 2 months ago. 2 months. So the friend that was in a band with me had come out to drop off some food, but I believe he had only done so because he'd found out that another former bandmate from the same group had already sent me a care package. And this individual, the second one to come out, when the wife had left, these two guys had wanted to meet with me and hear my side of the story and find out whatever. And this guy was extremely dubious as to the possibility that a guy that he's known for years and years and been in regular contact with very frequently, almost weekly sometimes, that was leaning more toward, well, maybe what my wife had said was true. Even after talking to me, reading the thing that she'd sent me, and hearing out my explanation. And this was the individual that, when I would refer to the various behaviors that people do as gaslighting or projecting, he would say, well, wow, you say that an awful lot about an awful lot of people. Are you sure it isn't you? And at the time that we met to discuss the reasons for the wife leaving, he had said that he had been told before that he was a narcissist, and he'd looked into it and thought that it was possible. So even when he came out with the care package, he was like, I'm just going to ask you point blank, are you a narcissist? And I was like, you know, that's a trick question that I can't answer one way or the other, because if I say yes, I'm saying I'm something that I'm not. And if I say no, I'm obviously in some sort of denial. So I was like, I'll answer that very carefully. The reality is that I was raised by one. I have several traits, and that was the thing that we had discussed when the wife left, is that she had taken my openly discussing traits about myself that I had realized were abnormal way late into life, that I was working out from me so that I would not behave in that way. This is not something that a narcissist does. So for that guy, he wanted to be seen as helping, whereas the other friend had simply seen my cry for help, found out my address, and sent me stuff without making any hullabaloo about it. The exact same kind of tone that I got from my friend called me on the phone yesterday that was the same, are you sure it isn't you? And it's like, no, it's not. And I told him before that this kind of thing has happened frequently and repeatedly, and yes, I have self-checked every single time, is it actually me? And the whole point is that when somebody's playing mind games, they're trying to get you to question yourself and your own sanity, to possibly accept blame for things that are not your fault. And I'd explained to him when he told me that he was going into the insurance business and that there would be an opening for me by, I don't know, right about this time, to do outbound contact calls to get a hold of the people that had signed up for this insurance to set up appointments, which that's completely evaporated. Much like the neighbor telling me that he was going to get me in touch with a local hemp farmer, and I asked him about it a couple months later, and he's, I guess I lost that guy's phone number. So when I say it's the same thing over and over again, and I've got now historical record on video in past months and year now of me discussing things like this, and you can even go farther back to me discussing the issues that I had with the van driving job for the newspaper, that it's the exact same thing every time, and it's not my behavior, it's that something about me makes other people want to mess with me. And yes, I know that sounds like a delusion of persecution, but when it actually happens, that's not delusion. Delusion is that you imagine it and that nothing of the sort is actually happening. And obviously it's not the case. The way everyone has behaved, even at this new job, it's the same thing. And when I told this friend about that, he seemed dubious. When I told him before, about 4 or 5 months ago, about, he's talking to me about this insurance gig, and It's basically everybody was interested in giving me a false sense of hope so that I wouldn't self-destruct or do anything irrational. Well, I would venture to say that me acting out might actually be rational, but doing something that could harm others or myself. That even then, once I laid out my entire work history and the fact that other than jobs that only require a pulse taking me on, I had issues finding employment for long before any of the stuff that came up with the newspaper a couple years ago, long before I had met my now estranged wife. I've had these same issues getting work. And so now I'm waiting to hear back from a place about a possible rehire when I didn't actually work for this employer before. And I haven't heard back yet. I'm hoping I do. I'm going to apparently call again on Monday, and hopefully if it stays dry enough this weekend, I got some brake work to do on my truck and try and figure out what's up with that tail light and maybe run a wire from the other end of the wiring harness and see if I can't get it to work. So I'm going to run out of room here pretty soon on this video, and I'll be done with it at that. I'm not complaining. I'm not trying to attract negativity or anything else. I'm simply recounting the events of my day and re-emphasizing the fact that this pattern is a thing that I've endured for a long time. You can call it long suffering, you can call it all sorts of things, which the irony being some of the most religious, devout, pious, like legit religious people, not just hypocrites, legit religious people, cannot accept when I tell them about the level of long suffering and oppression that I receive from seemingly out of nowhere. And the other thing, though, is I'm already aware of the fact that that's how it's going to be. It's kind of written down in a few places that that's how it's going to be. So, currently unemployed, not losing sleep, not having anxiety attacks, not having mood swings. That's the other thing. When I'm in a calm disposition and not having any of those things happen, it's because I'm not under stress. And if I'm under stress, it's only because the stress is being induced, because the job I had wasn't difficult. The people that I was interacting with as customers were totally cool. My tills never came up short, except for one day where the boss had come in and played ATM on stuff and took a bunch of things. It's like another storm rolling in. So I'll close with this. There are other people that go through the same kind of thing as me, and they also have difficulty getting anyone to listen or pay attention or care. And I'm actually past the point of caring myself whether anyone believes me. However, it's not going to stop me from staying honest, staying true to my principles, and it's a fact. I've been through a ton of psychological and emotional abuse the last 10 years of being married. Between employers, between the estranged wife, between her family. I know, and between my own family too, I know full well how to tell when someone is messing with me. I know full well how to tell when I'm being lied to. It's a skill that I've unfortunately become quite adept at. And I know that the chance is always there at every place I go. But, like I said in the previous long video about this with the red flags in the title, there were a number of behaviors having this conversation with the coworker, the way responses were made, the way tones of voice were, the facial expressions, that it's obvious that my careful speaking of a certain way to draw out certain behaviors was successful, and that would not have been successful if it was all in my head. So I'm going to let this go. I'm going to start this uploading while my 2 hailstorm videos upload as well. And I'm going to spend the weekend working on the house and the vehicle as able. And come Monday, if I don't hear anything from the other job, then I'm going to call and inquire. And if I get the runaround, I'm just going to go see about it from somewhere else. I've got enough cash to put gas in my truck. If absolute need be, if it looks like it's going to be a complete dead end again, I've got enough cash to put into the bank that I'd held over to pay my electric bill for this month as well, which will get me through until the end of August before I have to worry about being cut off. So, that's what I say about being the opposite of learning disabled. I am pretty clever. I am actually very good and responsible with my money. And one way or another, I'm going to get through this. Whether anybody else wants to help me with it, whether anybody else wants to give me a fair shake or not. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to survive. If nothing else, to spite all of these people that, for whatever reason, maybe it's because I'm somewhat of an empath, but they can't feed on me. They want to try and hurt me. And if they can't do either of those things, they get very upset, and then they fade into the background. And I persist. As the end of the B'nai Gesserit litany against fear says, when the fear has passed, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.